Welcome back to One Stop Law. Now, we all know that the Russian Ukraine crisis has entered into the third week. It's almost 20 days past that the war is still going on. Uh, all the major countries across the world, the international institutions have condemned this action of Russia in the strongest words possible. Adding to that, the Western world, including USA and European nations, have imposed multiple sanctions on Russia, one of which includes a major economic sanction which is called the SWIFT ban. So, in this lecture, we will try to look into the concept of SWIFT system, what exactly is the SWIFT system, how the ban has impacted Russia, and how far has it been able to address this situation or create pressure on Russia to, end this uh, act of aggression and military operation in Ukraine. Now, we all know that on 24th February 2022, Russia had invaded Ukraine. Although it had named it as a special military operation on Ukraine, but it is nothing but an act of aggression on the territory of Ukraine, which Russia has done. And immediately following 2 days after the aggression started, on 26th of February, USA and the major European countries decided to cut off the key Russian banks from the SWIFT system. Now, what basically is this SWIFT system? SWIFT, its full form is Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. Now, unlike its tedious long name, its purpose is quite clear. It acts as a global messaging system which relays instructions from one bank to another. Headquartered in Belgium, SWIFT is a member owned cooperative. So, it is a payment system used internationally by more than 200 countries and almost more than 11,000 financial institutions. The central banks of almost every major country, including countries like USA, Japan, China, India, etc., they use this SWIFT system globally to send and receive transfer requests securely. So in this slide, you can see how this SWIFT system works. So in other words, moving money internationally from one account to another involves participation of multiple intermediaries. And since there are many intermediaries across the world involved, one has to get everybody to agree on how to communicate. So SWIFT does exactly for all of us. In fact, the SWIFT system does not actually move the money itself, but it only offers a secured platform to communicate and transfer this request between various institutions across the world. It merely communicates the source, the amount, and destination when money is to be moved. It routes the payment instructions from one bank to another, allowing them to to know how the money should move. So uh, it allows people and institutions within a country, you know who need to effect cross border payments to do these payments through SWIFT. So basically it is like SMS or like FB messenger of payment transfer. uh, it works just how the phone network facilitates call. SWIFT facilitates movement of money. So basically, it gives instruction to a bank to transfer the amount of money to the destination bank. And that's why every bank has a SWIFT code. I'll discuss the formation of the SWIFT code in the next slide. So as you can see in this slide, a SWIFT code consists of 11 long digits, of which the first four represents the bank name, the second two represents the country code. The the following the next two digits represent the location code, and the last three characters basically represent the branch code. And there are some mandatory instructions to it. That is, the bank code can only be in the form of letters. The country code also should be in the form of letters. Location code should include, may include letters and digits. And the branch code, it's kind of optional. It can be either in the form of numericals or letters. So you can see I have given an example of the Swift code of SBI main branch of Andhra Pradesh. So you can see SBIN, this is the bank code, the code of SBI bank. Followed by IN is the country code. Then BB is the location code, which is common for the whole of India. And then 825 is the branch code of the particular Andhra Pradesh SBI bank. So this is how a Swift code is formulated, and this is very important for making any cross-border payments. So basically this Swift code can be considered as the post code of a bank. If one person has to transfer money from, say, one SBI bank in India, from one of his SBI account in India to one of his British friend, okay, whose account is in a British bank, then apart from his, his friend's bank account number, this Indian person also has to write down this particular Swift code of that British bank where his friend has an account. And when this money is sent, the Swift will actually communicate to that bank in Britain the fact that money is being transferred and the amount of transfer, etc. So from this bank, so every details go from the Swift code of one bank, in this case from your bank, SBI bank in India, to your friend's British bank in Britain through that code. Now let us look into the effect or impact of this Swift ban or Swift cutoff on Russia. Now since the Russian banks have been cut off from the Swift system, it means that neither can these Russian banks now accept money from international sources, nor can they send any money anywhere else in the world. So this sanction significantly hinders movement of money into and out of Russia, which is bound to cause a higher inflation and weaken the value of Russian currency ruble. So the main aim of this ban, of this Swift cutoff, is to cripple Moscow's ability to finance the Russian military, but it is also to affect every other aspect of Russian economy, to the extent of trickling all the way down to the ability of businesses and households to move money outside the country. So basically this Swift ban targets Russia to pressurize it to stop the war, being one-sided economically and financially, so that it stops the aggression it has done on Ukraine and pulls back its force. The major two effects on this Swift ban on Russia is, of course, its economy, because it depends largely on export of oil and gas supply. Basically, Russia is the largest exporter of oil and gas resources for the European countries, and cutting off this Swift ban, cripples its financial transaction with all the countries, and therefore hampers or hinders its economy to the strongest way possible. And as people cannot transact with Russian money, Russian ruble, it is bound to bring down the value of Russian currency, as a result of which its countrymen faces inflation which they are facing. We can see long lines outside the ATMs which are running out of cash, because the digital transactions have hindered a lot really badly in Russia. Now, just like every coin has two sides, every action has both a positive and a negative impact. So, we just learnt about the impact of Swift ban, the desired impact rather on Russia, with the intention with which the Western countries have imposed this Swift ban on Russia. But the problem is, it is not, any caveat free. It has its own limitations as well. The first and foremost limitation is the too much dependency of the Western countries on Russia for their oil and gas supply, and that is the major reason why not all Russian banks are cut off from this SWIFT system. only a few banks have been cut off initially, because Western countries are still dependent on Russia for majority supply of their oil and gas resources. The second is the second problem, the second drawback is that it's not like that only Russia won't be able to engage in any trade the moment they are kicked off from the SWIFT. And that is why we can see that even though the SWIFT cutoff has been done on way back on 26th February, the war is still going on. Okay, so uh, Russia is still able to communicate its payment instructions through other crude modes. Maybe they're back to their age-old methods of telephone or fax machine mode of payments. But yes, they are still being able to make the payments. The third drawback is that Russia have in the past. This is not the first time that Russia has faced this SWIFT ban. In my previous lecture, I have told you that in 2014 Russia had annexed Crimea Islands as well. So during that time also, Russia had faced lighter levels of SWIFT sanction on it, and from that time only Russia was preparing itself to make it strong, make its payment system strong, apart from SWIFT. So it has worked on creating its own domestic messaging system for making payments, which might not be as sophisticated as the SWIFT system, but yes, it helps them to do the job. So Russia has actually reduced its dependency on dollar transaction and SWIFT systems from 2014 onwards, and it has built up its own system. So yes, maybe this SWIFT ban may have a short term effect, may have had a short term effect on Russia, but in the long run Russia will actually come up some way or the other to create its own process system. And that is a very dangerous thing, because it shows that Russia has no intention to stop its acts of aggression against these sanctions. It is equipping itself with its own domestic system, so that it doesn't bother about the international community, and is can go on with its acts of aggression year after year, which it has done in 2014, and again it is repeating itself in 2022. Now, the final drawback of this SWIFT block on Russia is that this SWIFT cutoff also has its impact on other countries of the world as well. Now, as it is estimated that foreign banks have $121 billion worth assets owed to them by the Russian based entities. So cutting Russian banks from SWIFT system at this point can actually make it very hard for these banks to collect this money, and the companies will undoubtedly face a lot of problem and difficulty in conducting trade with Russian counterparts like Germany and other countries, and to pay the Russian staffs there, or in buying goods from Russia. So that is the main reason why the Western countries has not blocked all the banks of this SWIFT system. They have kept some banks online for certain trade for essential things like oil and gas, critical exports to the European global economies. So in conclusion, it can be said that the willingness of the West, particularly European nations, to accept these hardships and economic sacrifices, which are actually not small, reflect their concern over this war situation, as also the seriousness with which they have taken this Russian action, as a threat on Western democracy or European democracy post World War. So the Western countries are very much determined to impose as much sanctions and restrictions on Russia possible to make it finally withdraw its forces from Ukraine. But the problem is, although the Western countries have decided to cut off Russia from SWIFT system, yet it is not enough. We can see it is not enough to dissuade Russia, and specifically their President Vladimir Putin, from backing off. Why I'm saying this? Because we can see that it's already 22 days, the war is still going on. Now the civilians are being attacked and being killed. desperate attempt or threatening of nuclear war is being given, and no one knows what can actually convince President Putin to call off this destructive war. So sanctions are punitive measures, and it's deterrent of sorts. So the idea of imposing sanction on Russia is to increase the cost of war and to dissuade it from pursuing the military invasion on Ukraine. Uh, which is kind of as of now seems to be a distant dream, because Russia, and specifically this person Mr. Putin, doesn't know to come back, I mean to pull back. He has, if he has decided to invade Ukraine or annex it or whatever, we don't know what exactly is in his mind, because now the NATO narrative also seems to be very blunt, because it could have easily asked Ukraine not to go for NATO. Ukraine has not joined it at, as of now. Ukraine was only eager to join NATO, so the deal could be very much could have been sealed, that Ukraine should not should never join NATO, and Russia should pull back its forces. But now, with almost, we are moving towards a month of this act of aggression. It's very, and with so much sanctions being imposed on Russia. In this video, I just discussed one particular major sanction with you. In my next video, I will discuss all other sanctions imposed on Russia so far. But still, we see that there is no sign of this crisis, uh, uh, coming to an end in very, very soon. That's all for this video. I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you all.